Talk to me, Kate.
She's saying testing.
Here, give her this one.
Excuse me. Switch.
Thank you very much. Testing, testing. Beautiful. Okay, wonderful. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you all tonight. For those of you that I don't know, I am State Representative Kate Farrar. I wonderfully represent the 20th District, which is where we are tonight, part of West Hartford, and then part of Newington. And tonight is a great opportunity for us to come together and talk about a really important topic, early childhood care and education. And we hope to provide some updates and talk through how this priority is showing up in a big way in the legislative session, and most importantly, get your questions and feedback, because we have several weeks to go in the legislative session. There's still a lot of opportunity for input, and that's why we wanted to host this. But to kind of to get us started, we are going to take a chance to go around, and if you're willing to share in the mic your name, and one of the things we wanted to have a chance to kind of set the tone and get to know each other a little bit tonight is each being willing to share a game that you loved playing when you were a kid. So when I was a kid, I have to admit, one of my favorite games, I was an only child, and so I had a lot of imaginary friends. And I used to play library, and I made up my own Dewey Decimal System that I attached to all my books, and you would come to my library, and I would stamp you out of my library, stamp the books out of my library. But I'm going to pass this to my colleagues, and then again, if you're willing to just share into the mic your name and a favorite game that you had as a kid, and then we'll get into some of the legislation.
Thank you so much. Is this the way you do it?
Yeah.
Good evening. It's good to see you here this evening. I'm Tammy Exum. I represent the 19th District, which is a part of mostly a large part of West Hartford, like 89%. The remaining part is Avon. And I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and I also am, we have someone coming in here, and I also chair the TCB, which is the Transforming Children's Behavioral Health Policy and Planning Committee, affectionately known as TCB for Taking Care of Business. And so this really focuses around behavioral health. And it's really great to be with you this evening. When I was a child, I loved games. So I loved freeze tag. That was really fun. And then I liked Life, the game of Life. Remember that with the cars and the little people in it?
Oh, yeah.
I like that. So anyway, there you go. Thank you good to see you. Look forward to the discussion. I don't know if you squeeze
Okay. All right.
You don't have to squeeze it.
No. Okay. Well, hey, everyone. Good to see you all. My name's Derek Slapp. I'm the state senator for West Hartford. Also represent almost all of Farmington, all of Burlington, and a little bit of Bloomfield. This guy's Mr. Bloomfield over here who just came in, and West Hartford too. So anyway, I just want to, say thank you for being here. I want to thank Kate. Can I just say Kate? Yeah, in terms of representative? Kate is a good friend, but also really shown a ton of leadership on this issue. And so I think we're all here, because of this bill and your leadership. So thank you. It's such an important issue. The game, without a doubt, the one my dad and I and brother did all the time was Scrabble. We call it in our house full contact Scrabble. You can't touch the dictionary unless there's a challenge. I know all the Q words that don't need a U, QOPH, QAT, all that stuff. Yeah, that's a good one. The alternate form of KAT, which is a Norwegian shrub, right? Yeah, there you go. So anyway, if anybody wants to play Scrabble later, bring it on. All right. Here you go, Howard.
Yeah, I'm Howard Savronsky. I'm a resident in West Hartford. I'm currently the Chief Behavioral Health Officer at Connecticut Children's, and soon to be, with the help of the House, the state's new behavioral health advocate. I grew up in New York City, and in a working class neighborhood. We didn't have Nintendo, we didn't have any fancy stuff. My favorite game was called Stoop Ball, which all you needed was a stoop and a Spalding ball. And we would play that for hours and hours and hours. But I'm glad to be here.
Hi, Carrie Jones, former West Hartford administrator and current early childhood governance advocate, as a facilitator for our local governance partnership as we restructure in West Hartford at Early Start. My game is Boggle. Super Boggle is kind of nice, but classic 5-word got me really ready for Wordle.
Good evening, everyone. I am Renee Kleiman. I'm a resident of West Hartford. I have 2 children who went through birth to 3 and also received special education services starting in preschool. And my oldest is in high school and she's still on an IEP, and my son is also still on an IEP in middle school. I was a social worker for the Early Learning Center here in West Hartford, and I am now their early childhood special education coordinator with the State Department of Ed. Oh, my game. Oh. Yes, so important. And I have so many games listening to everybody. And stoop ball, my parents are from the Bronx and spent a lot of time in the Bronx, so I know about stoop ball. And my parents are here visiting now, and they are teaching my children blackjack. That was really big. Cards was really big when I was a kid. We joke that I learned to count through cards from my grandmother, and now that's happening with my children. So, card games.
Nice. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joyce Coles. I am the school readiness liaison for West Hartford. I live in Farmington now. I grew up in West Hartford, and I worked at the Children's Hospital for some time, as did my husband. And then I was the director of the preschool in West Hartford for about 15 years or so. My game, backgammon. Yeah, and I still play it in my house, but yeah, we did when we were younger. That was the big deal.
Hi, my name is Kristen Kuhl, and I'm the director of the Family Resource Center at Charter Oak. My favorite game, I'm torn between Scrabble, because definitely Scrabble, I'll take you on, and Whist, where we're a big card family growing up.
I don't believe this really works. My name is Judy Small. I live in West Hartford. I'm here as a grandparent, but I have a 5-year-old granddaughter, so I'm watching. Because you know what happens with these rates. Guess who's really paying them? So anyway, my favorite game as a kid probably was either Red Rover. You have to be really old to know what that is. And Go Fish. Excellent. Oh, here.
We're just introducing ourselves and sharing one of our favorite games as a kid.
Oh, favorite game, okay. Carol Mulready, resident of West Hartford, and interested in education in general. I was a member of the board here in town for a number of years, and certainly follow education for a long time for my children and also grandchildren. I have grandchildren in town. My interest in all the legislation you all try to pass comes through the League of Women Voters too. So we can't follow everything, but try to stay in touch. And finally, the game. So with the little ones, I will play anything with them that they want to play. But as they get a little bit older, I love to be the one to teach them how to play Monopoly.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Amy Yarbrough. I'm the coordinator of Great by 8, family liaison with the Family Resource Center, and I also work with the Open Choice program here in West Hartford. And we spent a lot of time outdoors growing up, so we sort of created our own games. There wasn't necessarily a name to the game, but when we were indoors, we had multiple days long Monopoly games. And we would shove it under the couch and pull it out for the next round. And nobody could touch it. And you would know, you would write down what properties you had. They were serious.
Hi, I'm Irene Garneau. I am the supervisor for early childhood education for West Hartford Schools. I am a lifelong resident in West Hartford, raised both of my children in West Hartford. I think I'm a very gamey person because I'm resonating with 90% of what folks, except for the stoop ball, sorry. not a city girl. I will say I'm a card player and a word player. So I gotta go with boggle. I gotta go with setback. I learned that very early. I mean, cribbage, and then capture the flag for outside as a kid.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Graham, and I'm a resident of West Hartford and an advocate for early childhood education. We played a lot of card games in our family, and we're still playing one called 99. And if you want to learn how to add, you play 99 if you want to win.
Hi, I'm Carrie Stockman. I'm a resident of West Hartford, and my favorite game when I was a kid was neighborhood kickball. And my dad was always the pitcher, and it was just a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Mike Stockman, a resident of West Hartford, adopted grandparent of how many kids now? 10, 11? Of this age. And games, I grew up in Philly versus New York, and we did box ball, which was played with a star ball or a pimple ball, and on the streets of Philly. So that's my favorite.
Hi, I'm Sarah Schuyler Galloway from West Hartford here, just in Elmwood, a couple blocks up. I've been a teaching assistant at the Montessori School of Greater Hartford. I have a almost 16-year-old son who's a sophomore at Conard. Favorite game, I would say long time since I was 5, Uno. Simple but fun and just great for everyone. Yeah.
Danny Gammerman, West Hartford resident. Monopoly if it's inside, hide and seek if it's outside.
I'm Carolyn Gammerman, his wife. I'll tell you a little bit more about us. We lived on Long Island for decades, moved here a few years ago because we have now 2 grandsons in West Hartford, and our kids are all working, as I'm sure most of, and childcare is a big expense. I am a retired early childhood special educator, and I ran for a number of years the Long Island Early Childhood Direction Center, which provided information to parents and providers about kids with disabilities. I grew up in Indiana. Games, I was mostly outside, running around, climbing trees, riding my bike, trying not to get into too much trouble. That's about it. I mean, I did like puzzles too, but.
Hi, my name's Alyssa. I'm with Childcare for CT. If we're talking about games, I grew up in the middle of the sticks, so we played with sticks, and I have older brothers, and we would just kind of go to war with each other.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Suzanne Levere. I'm a resident of West Hartford. I've been here about 32 years. Don't have grandkids yet, not engaged in that game at all, but I've been involved with the Aurora Foundation for some time, and so became aware of a focus on early childhood education through Aurora. I also studied to teach early childhood at St. Joe's for grad school, and so I'm here just as an interested party and trying to understand some of the issues around this bill a little bit better. Oh, sorry. Outside Mumbledy Peg, which I'm sure is pretty controversial, but it involved throwing knives into the dirt. And, right, remember? It was very cool.
Lawn darts?
No, you took a knife in your hand and you flipped it down into the dirt, and if it stuck right, that was... I got them all. No, you sat down and did it. It's not good. And Monopoly for inside, which is way more acceptable. You can delete that.
Phil Eisner, high school educator, West Hartford resident, prospective business owner, father of 3 who all have gone through or are currently going through daycare. And my favorite game outside, wiffle ball. One of the neighbors had a dead end on his side street. And inside, Trivial Pursuit. The original version with my parents. Don't know how I even had a chance, but.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Marty Ryan. I'm a West Hartford resident, and during my working life, I did a fair amount of work with the Graustein Foundation on the Birth to 8 program, so I'm familiar with a lot of what you do, and thank you for that. In my retirement, I am the chair of the board for the Bloomfield Preschool and Daycare Center at my church, Bloomfield Congregational Church. And my favorite game outside, growing up in the snow belt, was Duck, Duck, Goose. Oh, I see some of you know. And my inside game, yes, we are. Yes, we are. And you lead. And my inside game was Oh Hell, which we played at Thanksgiving. It's the only time we could say that word.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
As well. Good evening, good
You
afternoon.
got the cue now? You got a sense of the cue?
I think so. Good afternoon. I'm Bobby Gibson, State Representative. During the day, I am a middle school principal at Jamoki Academy Hartford Honors in Hartford. What's the cue? You just
Cue?
threw my mind
Now
off.
I screwed you up. Just share a little bit about your role in legislature.
Thank
and
you.
then
So
what your
my role in legislature is to make sure I listen to my mentor, Judy Small over there, who I taught with at Fox Middle School. And as a child, I had 2 games. So Capture the Flag, right? Awesome game. And Hide and Go Seek.
Awesome. So for those 2 that walked in, if you're willing to introduce yourselves and just share your favorite game as a child. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Viviane Rinaldi. I'm a West Hartford resident. I'm originally from Brazil, living in West around 7 years now, always in Connecticut, and in West Hartford around 3-4 years. I'm a paraleader, community leader, so really engaged and really interesting to hear from you. My the favorite game is Brazilian soccer, of course. I love soccer. And Captain, what's the name of the game you say?
Capture the flag.
Yeah, in Brazil we say rouba a bandeira, so it's the same thing. Thank you. What's the next person?
Hi, I'm Jessica Goldstein. I'm a researcher at the University of Connecticut, and we work on research projects and strategic planning for the Office of Early Childhood. I was trying to figure out the question while I was listening to the answers. So I was thinking I like to play Spit, which is a card game when I was younger. But I also feel like I want to share that we just got an all-weather cornhole set for the backyard. And I spent a lot of April break with my teenager playing cornhole. So we had outside time too.
Now that everyone's in the full game mode, we could play many of these games, as we said already today, but I hope that you learned something new, met someone new already in the room tonight, and I hope more than anything that we all know why we're here, which is why we wanted to have a chance for everyone to introduce themselves. And to get us started, there was a handout, and I want to make sure, does everyone have the handout from the front table? If not, raise your hand, and Michaela can, raise your hand if you need a handout. Michaela can bring them around. And I just want to make sure everyone has a chance to thank Michaela. Michaela is one of our outreach aides at the legislature, and she was very pivotal in helping us put this together, and she's pivotal with helping us put a lot of events together. But what we thought was helpful tonight, yes, so thank you, Michaela. Cheers for Michaela. Everyone got a handout? Okay, awesome. What we hope to do tonight is really, first off, to kind of share a little bit what's going on legislatively, and then really shift pretty quickly into getting your feedback on what your personal experience is, what's going on for you, your family, the families you might serve, and how you think some of this legislation might help, or things that you feel like are still missing from what's being talked about. First off, I would say the good news in the legislature this year is that I would say we've never had as many bills as we have this session as we do on early childhood care and education. That's a good thing. Where we're at right now is that there are 3 key priority bills, and those are the ones I'm going to provide very high-level information about tonight, all of which try to make significant investments in the early childhood care and education sector, and both to help families and to help providers. And What is unique right now is there is a House priority bill, which I'm fortunate to lead on. There's also a governor's priority bill, and there's also a Senate priority bill. And we are in negotiations right now between the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. And that's why, as I shared at the outset, your input and feedback is so pivotal, because these decisions have not been fully solidified. We are working through each of these bills and making sure we come up with a good package that, again, helps so many of you and so many of the kids that we're trying to serve. And I would just say, you all know a lot of the challenges as to why we're here. And I don't know that we have to spend a lot of time on that. Just you all bringing up being a grandparent or a parent or a provider, you see every day just the high costs of care, and then the provider side, just how difficult it is to be a provider and to make ends meet as a provider. And I would just say one item that always kind of sticks in my mind as a factoid is we often say, over the years, we've made such contributions to our K-12 system. And when you look at the type of investment that's made in K-12 versus early childhood only has 1/20th of the funding that our K-12 system has. And yet we know from all of the research that the greatest brain development, right, happens in that birth to 5 years. And so we're really trying to switch that perception of what that investment needs to look like for birth to 5 and not just K-12. So there's 3 bills that, again, I'm going to highlight at a very high level, and then have, again, the opportunity for some more dialogue amongst all of us. So the House bill that, again, is briefly highlighted here. And I would just say tonight, from all of us that are here as legislators, don't feel like this is the only chance to give your feedback. I mean, we're around every day for you all to give your thoughts. So this is a great opportunity, but please always feel free to get in touch with us. So House Bill 5003 has several key components. One is meant to deliver faster funding to families. A second is how we're supporting childcare educators. And a third is how we're updating and creating new childcare facilities. So with House Bill 5003, it actually increases the eligible families who can access Care for Kids, which is our childcare subsidy in the state. And it also ensures that providers are getting paid in advance who might be offering Care for Kids, the childcare subsidy. Right now, providers get paid later, like after they've served the kids. In regards to educators in 5003, because we know that we need to retain and recruit educators, and that's not going to happen unless we increase pay and benefits. And so in 5003, there's a focus on putting the rates in place, so we're moving teachers who are in early childhood up the pay scale and the salary scale to, kind of reach parity with K-12 educators. And there's also a program to establish a health insurance subsidy for early childhood educators, because we know from most employers that they don't offer health insurance, and we know that that could be a benefit for educators if they were able to access more affordable health insurance. And then finally, there is a bonding component to 5003, which means the state would borrow funds for capital expenses that early childhood care facilities could apply for facility upgrades or to create new facilities. And that's meant to really support those upgrades, very similar to what our schools might have access to, and making sure that early childhood providers have that. So that's what's in House Bill 5003. The distinction for the governor's bill and then the Senate bill, which are on this handout, is the governor's bill is very focused on pre-K specifically. So House Bill 5003 and the Senate bill both address birth to 5, whereas the governor's bill is very focused on pre-K. And so they're looking to use funding specifically for making preschool free for families making up to $100,000, establishing a 20-day maximum for families making up to $150,000, and then creating more spaces of pre-K slots based on where they're needed in our state geographically. And then finally, in the governor's bill, there is a component of creating what's called a new online portal that families could easily go on and see what immediate slots are available for kids to access for pre-K. And then finally, Senate Bill 1 also tries to address childcare for birth to 5. The reason there's a little less information I would say about Senate Bill 1 is Senate Bill 1 came out later than the other bills, and there is a new draft of this that has been put forward. But what this bill does, which is a little different than the other bills, is it tries to create a system in which no family would be paying more than 7% of their income on childcare. And so if you are a family, and if you're a family and you're looking for care, this also develops an online portal for people to find the care that they need. But on the provider side, basically the state would fund the provider for the provider to not charge above that 7% that the parent might be able to afford. And so this bill, again, there aren't as many details on it. I would say in some ways it's more conceptual than the other bills, but it provides you a sense of what the Senate is thinking about to bring down costs for families. So those are, in a nutshell, like the 3 big bills that are out there. And again, what I would say right now is that this is a moment where folks are coming together, discussing the ideas, and trying to figure out what do people like, not like, what actually is a solution that can really fix some of these problems that we have in front of us. So I think for all of us tonight, most importantly, based on what you heard and based on your own experiences, I think more than anything, we just want to open it up to hear from you about what you think is working or not working in early childhood care and education right now. And based on some of what you might have heard in some of these proposals, what sounds most beneficial to you, or what do you think is missing? So I really just kind of open it up for anyone that wants to share or ask further questions. So happy to answer further questions too. Do you all want to comment before we open it up?
No.
Yeah.
Not really. I think what I'd like to do is really hear from everyone,
Yeah.
and we'll take it from there and have a conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Someone wants to go first. Yes, Marty will go first. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you. As you already said, the importance of the learning for young children is so critical, and the pay is pitiful. So anything that can happen that raises the quality, that raises the pay, which means we get higher quality teachers and we can retain them, would be a really great thing. And the other thing I really like in here is that the pay gets provided in advance rather than after the fact, because trying to balance the budget when you have the money hasn't come yet is really a challenge.
Jennifer, do you have the other mic? Okay, because then we can hold one here and then we can pass one. Let's just make sure it works. If you can get that one, Michaela. Anyone else agree with everything Marty said? I know I do. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I know. I keep thinking about, because Tammy, you often say how when you worked in the field, you realized that, gosh, this is not only hard, but the amount I'm getting paid, even then.
I have to say, it has been a long time, but this was where I started. I was an early childhood education major, and it was funny when I was in college, undergrad. I worked in a child care center one summer. I know this was illegal because I was by myself. Yes. And it was really, it was a really rough situation, which made me say, oh, when I'm going to graduate to second graders because it'll be very sophisticated and go to a public school system. But it was really, really tough. That was a long time ago. But I was also very involved with Graustein, I've been a part of this work even over the years, even though, I've had many different careers since. And it was difficult. And it's the same situations and issues that we talked about a long time ago, because Graustein has been some time when we had our early childhood collaboratives that were a part of really kind of looking at this and knowing the investment. Then I think we said, we got $7 for every dollar invested. We know that this is the time that the brain is most developing. I mean, we know that if you don't put this into the product early, that you get the outcomes when you go through the public school system or whatever educational system you go through. You see the dividends when you put in the investment early. And yet here we still find so many of the same issues. So I think this is an important and timely discussion. How we do it is the question, but we do know that provider pay is a big part of it. And also, I also really like, even though I'm in the House, so why wouldn't I say this? But I also really like that it allows some work around the facilities itself. I think that's really important too, and another unique piece to this. So, but enough about my thoughts at this point. I told Howard I wasn't going to say much. There I go.
Did you want to add, Bobby? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're here and we're talking about this. And Kate, thank you for your advocacy and what you're doing on this, because we know as educators, birth to 3 is so important. And I think prior to this, years ago, we're thinking about early childhood education as just being a daycare where we have the parents got to go to work, they have to have someone watch the kids, right? And so what they do, they play all day, they eat crackers, they sleep, and they really don't take advantage of an opportunity to close the opportunity gap. And there is an opportunity gap. In some more affluent neighborhoods, it's not as much. But, I know in some of the neighborhoods in which we've taught, there's a huge opportunity gap. And, COVID has exposed a lot of that. So, again, it's glad that we're out here doing this. It's in a very important time in our youngsters' lives. If they have not learned how to read by 3, they're such a disadvantage. And being a middle school educator, my school is grades 5 through 8. And I get the little babies coming here in grades 5, and they're already behind the 8 ball. And so they have to catch up. So this is such an important initiative that we're working on right now. Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. Who has the other mic? Oh, Michaela does. Yeah, awesome. Any thoughts, please? Yeah, right here. That's why you all are here.
I thought I was just listening, but I'm going to share. Oops. I guess it's working. Hi. As a former school principal, something that I heard in Alliance districts in a variety of districts, a similar issue around childcare for parents who work not a traditional 9-to-5 schedule. So that's something, just from my experience, was a challenge quite often. Secondly, childcare opportunities for children who are involved in birth to 3. Support. So providing those kinds of specialized training and care for children with identified needs early in their. So I'm wondering if either of these really addresses those enough. So I see the facilities, but does that allow someone who's a currently not licensed home care provider to potentially have the funds to be able to renovate their home or afford an opportunity for, say, second or third shift care?
Great question. Hold on to the mic. With the facilities piece, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, so the way the facilities program would work is that it is not specific to state-funded programs. Any center-based or home-based provider could apply for the funding. The distinction is based on similar programs that are in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. If the property is leased, there would have to be a long-term lease agreement set up with the landlord. For instance, in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, depending on the level of funds, they have set up a lease agreement between 5 and 25 years. And that may seem ridiculous to think about, but what it does is it actually puts the onus more on the landlord that the property, if it changes hands, needs to remain a childcare. And that way, the resource that went into the project remains for that length of time of that lease agreement. And therefore, the projects that would be a part of this bonding program could be, everywhere from $50,000 up to several $1 million. And there would be 3 different sets of options based on the level of facility. So we've definitely learned from some other states about how to address some of the home-based care providers, because they're the ones who often can offer the different schedules for many folks. So that's very important. Are you talking about birth to 3 and APROPES at all? Has that come up? I'm curious.
It has come up as far as we're looking at some of just the numbers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
This needs to be funded. That's the heart of it. Yeah.
And the struggles that we're going through every day, is there, given the concerns about cuts to Medicaid and all of these really critical funding, we've been trying to get the guardrails off and do a whole kind of stuff. What is the likelihood that there's going to be enough money for this initiative?
Okay, yeah. throws me under the bus. Yeah, no, it's a great question. There's a lot of talk in the legislature right now of us doing, we adjourn the first week of June, right? So we are going to hopefully finish our business and have a state budget before there's a federal budget. So there's a lot of speculation that what we're going to have to do is, make a certain set of assumptions about federal funding being in place. And of course, every day there's a new executive order and there's, whatever, it's changing. But then we will probably have to come back in at the end of the summer before the federal budget takes effect to make adjustments. And it'll really require us to prioritize because we don't have, about 25%, close to it, of the state budget comes from the federal government. Right? So there's no way that we can backfill all of it. I'm chair of the higher education committee, and UConn is losing a couple $100 million, like just in federal research, just as one example. That's going to have a big impact if they're not able to claw it back, just in West Hartford and Farmington, et cetera, for grad students and research and all that stuff. So that's just you go down almost every committee and every agency and say if these things go through. It's going to be really, really bad. So we're going to have to, and we're working on that now to come up with some contingency plans. But what are the priorities? I would say that early childhood education has to be a top priority. Medicaid is going to be another really top priority because we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about people's lives, and we're talking about children, and we're talking about our seniors in nursing homes and things. But I think that, and then this will have to be really, one of the top priorities. But we don't know how much, right? We're going to have to backfill. So I try to not be super partisan when it comes to, I don't think that's a great way to convince people on the other side of the aisle is just to say, oh my gosh, what did you do? And to, but to really try to show them that there are real ramifications now about, and it's not theoretical, like it's happening and we just don't know the extent of it. But I agree with you. The uncertainty keeps me up at night, but I hope we prioritize this. Yeah.
I just agree. I think it's a really difficult time, and to be honest, I'm glad that we have money that has been held because this is something that's unprecedented, and we don't know exactly what to expect. And until we have that certainty, we have to plan. It is, you talk about a rainy day fund, it's about to really pour. And it's a matter of looking at priorities, understanding collectively, we cannot cover everything we care for, and we know it's important. And I do believe that's exactly what will happen. We'll do the best we can with the budget. We will come back. maybe once, maybe twice, and really see where we get. But I know that we know what is important. We know, we hear, we know, we understand. It's just really, really difficult when you see what may very well take place and what is taking place. I mean, we see it in the behavioral health piece. We see it, when I'm sitting in these hearings and appropriations, and you hear, the person coming in saying, gosh, I just heard at midnight the arts are cut. Like all these things are cut, and they're all important for different reasons, and they overlap. So it's a really complicated time, but do know this is a priority. I mean, the governor saw this as a priority, really trying to be creative with creating this fund, whether or not everyone doesn't agree with it, but it is at least showing that it is prioritized within the legislature.
And I would just say that to kind of add to the moment, there's cuts that have been threatened. There's cuts that are real, which is about $200 million that's already been cut. And then there's considerations for just challenges for the current work getting done. I bring that up because the Head Start offices that regionally served Connecticut, as folks are nodding, were closed about 2 weeks ago now. And there was mass confusion, as you can imagine, in regards to what did that mean for funding, especially because the folks who receive Head Start money in the state, their next contract date is supposed to start May 1st. And they were suddenly in a situation where in Boston, which was the regional office that so many folks in our state directly worked with, there was no one to answer the phones anymore. Everyone's emails were cut off, and it's just been complete crisis for folks in getting a sense of if these dollars would continue. What I would say on that end around Head Start is that the Head Start providers in the state had at least, it seems, been told who they could connect with at another regional office. But again, there is still a lot of concern given the reports out of Washington, D.C., that they are trying to eliminate the Head Start program, which again is like one of the most long-standing early childhood programs in our country's history. So yes, I think all of the things that we face every day, they could be overwhelming, and they sometimes are. I think what we're trying to do as a state is we know that people, even before January, have been struggling, right? And so we want to be in a place where, yes, we're responding to federal cuts, but we also, as I said, had so many families, nearly 40% of our families, unable to make ends meet before all of these federal cuts. And so I think it's a both and that we're trying to really balance. And the good thing, as Rep. Exum said, was because in legislation last year, we established this early childhood care and education fund. We didn't put any money into it last year, but we established the concept in statute. It really allowed everyone to focus on how are we going to put sustainable money into this fund that is just for use on early childhood education. And that is still sustaining that idea. And we know it's important because, as we said, everyone here was struggling with paying those costs. Everyone here who's in the field was struggling with paying their own bills way before January. And so, I think we're really feeling how can we use our resources wisely around the federal cuts based on our rainy day fund, but then how can we make this longer term investment too? And we're going to keep trying to do both as long as we can. Do you want to comment on that? Okay. But great question.
Two things. One is education, my education. For these bills, do they have cost for the bill, implementation, numbers of people impacted, and lastly, maybe most importantly, in our trade-off between all the different choices we have, the payback for the dollar spent by bill? So you can make good choices, and we can give you support.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Okay.
Wouldn't you like that with all the bills. Uh,
One of these great ideas produces this return.
So
or
what I would
reduction of
say
cost.
is every bill has what's called a file copy. So if you go to the General Assembly website right now and you can look in the feature search for a bill, any one of these bills right now on the General Assembly website would have what's called a file copy, which would be a fiscal note on the bill and then a plain word summary of what's currently in the bill. What is not prepared for us is what you so wonderfully put forward, which is what is the ROI on any of these proposals? And that is not provided to us when we do legislative work. We have to utilize all the resources at our disposal to try to make that case, because the Office of Legislative Research and the Office of Fiscal Analysis, they don't provide us that long-term look, which, as you said, I mean, we need, right, to kind of make sure that we're making sense of how these dollars would pay off in the future. And what I would say around who would be served, again, it's a slightly different number because with each of these bills, it's a slightly different audience, as you noted. So with 5003, there's some families that are impacted. There's a certain number of educators that are impacted. With the governor's bill, again, it's a smaller universe of people because it's just pre-K. So you can think about it that way, that the governor's proposal is a smaller number, but more focused amount. And then with the Senate bill, again, they're more focused on families generally in birth to 5. But I love your suggestion and wish we could get that as a legislature all the time. But we don't get that with the bills. Yeah.
I'm gonna let Madam Principal go first.
Oh yeah. Please.
Can I go after her?
Yes. Yes.
Chicago has fantastic research on the short-term, long-term cost of, if we provide. Heckman out of University of Chicago has done, an economist out of U Chicago has suggested that investing in early childhood, longitudinal studies of children reap societal benefit and lower costs over the long term. So I just recommend anyone interested to look up that research.
There's actually been a lot of research on that by different economists, and probably since the 90s, or Rolnick started that in the 90s in Minnesota, but really anywhere from, I've read 7 to 1 to like up to $17, $18 for every dollar invested in return. And I was going to say something else, and now I forgot. So.
I think any contractor, any business person would love to get paid up front, all up front. So to suggest that we should pay our educators all up front doesn't match to what industry does. So I would say partial payment to begin with, a deposit and then a monthly or something, but all up front sounds a bit generous. I don't know.
Does anyone want to speak to how the payment works now?
I've been out of private sector for a while, so. I will say, you've referenced the focus.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I know a little bit.
Yes, I just want you to speak to why it's such a big deal.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into the details of the finances at any level, but it's quarterly. And what happens is we spend all the money, and then we have to wait, and we have to report, and then we have to wait until we get reimbursement. So we've already spent it, and it could be the last financial report I looked at for our school. It's way behind just 3 months. So it's way behind. So anything that would help to get us the money sooner would be a help, because we're paying the bills with our own savings, if you will, and then have to wait for the reimbursement.
Yeah, we've heard from some providers that providers have had to get loans. Had to take out loans.
Yeah. Well, not up front, but I mean, we pay salaries, and we pay utilities, and we pay all of that kind of stuff. But we have to report to the state on how many children and how many slots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, before we get any reimbursement. But we pay a quarter's worth, and then we wait. So it could be 6 months before we get reimbursed for money we spent at the beginning of the quarter. I mean, that's the best I can do with explaining.
That's for if you're funded that way. Right. And if you're not and you're private, whoops, thank you.
Oh,
sorry. And if you're private, you will get tuition on a weekly basis, so that's different. The money will come in, it's just not enough to pay what everyone needs. And I just wanted to comment, and Tammy, you were saying that this has been going on for about 40 years.
Yes.
I've been in early childhood for about that long, I think. And I had the pleasure to work at the Children's Hospital and as a director of a preschool and child care program, and we were paid as employees of the hospital. And we had benefits, we had sick time, we had vacation time, and the pay was fairly good. And I will say that the staff retention was incredible compared to other programs that don't have a business, or I had teachers there. I was there 16 years, and when I left, there were still teachers that I hired 16 years ago, and that's almost unheard of in private programs because the money is just not there, and you can't make a living doing that. But it was incredible to see that difference and that retention in staff when they were paid fairly and had benefits. It was amazing.
Exactly. Did you remember your thought?
I did.
Good. Okay.
Not necessarily related to the payment schedule, but so just a note on the governor's bill. My understanding that it does address infant toddler care in the way with the rates. So they didn't want to kind of take all of the high quality early childhood teachers out of infant toddler care because the pay was going to be better for the pre-K teachers. So the teacher pay would be commensurate with pre-K, which would also recruit, retain, and keep high quality providers in the infant toddler world, which is so important as well.
Yes, I think one of the things that will be a negotiation point will be how we retain a focus on infant toddler, and because infant toddler care is the most expensive care for families, and that's where we know that the greatest need is as well for families. They have the toughest time finding infant toddler care. And that's why we do want to make sure that as the proposals come together, that they're, for instance, as you said, in the governor's proposal, there is a rate component for infant toddler teachers, but we obviously want to make sure that that's maintained and that there's enough of a rate increase there to make sure that, again, everyone in the birth to 5 gets that support that they need. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Thank you for that. Yes. You know.
It was still my favorite age group.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
Oh.
Would you mind?
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
So I have two kind of unrelated questions. First one is, what are some of the other states that you guys modeled some of these bills after? Obviously, as a K through 12 educator, there's different performances and comparisons that you do across states for achievement and performance in school. But how do they compare in terms of the financial before and after of some of these funds that we are kind of replicating in Connecticut?
Yeah, okay, I can start there. We are definitely learning from other states. What I would say generally about the cost of childcare in Connecticut, we are the 5th most expensive state in the country for childcare. And it's one of the reasons why we're trying to address this in such a broad way because we have to do that in order to bring down the costs of care. When we looked at other states, there are several states, number one, that have also established these separate early childhood care and education funds. That's one of the reasons why last year we put that into statute. So there are several states, including New Mexico, Arizona, Kansas, and I want to say Louisiana, who all have fund structures where they've put dedicated revenue into a fund that can only be used for early childhood care and education. Also in Massachusetts, they passed by referendum 2 years ago a tax on the wealthiest in their state, the millionaires, the billionaires in their state, and that money was particularly dedicated towards education, early childhood care and education, and transportation projects. Several states, again, have taken this approach where there's a separate fund and created dedicated revenue. And then broadly, if you look at all the states in the country, really, that are trying to again, move the needle on decreasing family cost, increasing educator support. A number of the items, even in these bills, have been pulled from other states. So for instance, I can speak more specifically to what's in 5003, the piece around increasing the early childhood care subsidy program. That's very similar to what Vermont is doing. Vermont is continually increasing the families who are eligible for their child care subsidy as they bring more money into the system. The health insurance subsidy component that's in 5003 is actually from a tested program that is in Washington, D.C., where they have paid their educators more and provided this health insurance subsidy. And just by doing that over a 2-year time period, they increased retention by over 30%. So that's just giving you a couple examples. Again, the capital program was from Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So every state in the country, though, is trying to address this in some way. And we've really tried to pull, some of those tested strategies, into some of these pieces. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
Just as a follow-up, when you say we're the 5th most expensive,
Yes.
Is that in absolute terms or is that as a percentage of state median income?
Absolute terms.
Thank you.
Yeah. So per kid. In absolute terms, yep.
Question is there, how would the funding for some of these, obviously some of it is need-based by the parents and the families, but in terms of examples like the bonds for the renovations and the construction, are those going to be like geographically distributed based on like the highest need districts or towns that have the lowest ratios of available places and students that need care, or to be based on income of those areas, or how would that kind of play out for some of these other?
So first off, around the funding, the general funding concept for each of these, which Rep. Exum is in the middle of, we have this week both what's called our appropriations meeting deadline for putting forward an appropriations budget, which Rep. Exum is on, and then on the Finance Committee, we have our deadline to put forward the revenue part of the budget. And I bring that up because each of these proposals relies on taking what is currently operating surplus dollars, 300 million of those dollars, and putting it into this fund. And all of the funds are structured in a way that some of those dollars would go out the door and some of those dollars would remain to be invested so that it's treated like an ongoing investment in addition to being a fund. In regards to the different programs and how they would run in regards to who's eligible, the child care facilities program the money would be provided to the Office of Early Childhood, but then they would contract with an entity who would administer the program. This program has been in place actually for 2 years already by using some federal funding and some bond funding, but that funding isn't been set up on an ongoing basis, which is why we're setting up this ongoing bond program. The organization that's running that program is called LISC. They are local here in Hartford, and they have put forward an application process that all the facilities could apply. And to your point, it's working with the Office of Early Childhood. They really set priorities about how to make sure that they're meeting the need in different areas of the state, as well as meeting the need, as was brought up earlier, between center-based care or home-based care, because it's important not to put all the resources into center-based care when there's a lot of home-based care providers that are also serving an immense need. So the program application process, if you're super interested, Phil, I can send it to you. It's through LISC, the organization who has been running this program. And what's great about them is they provide technical assistance to all of the providers, because as a provider, it's not like you're a child care provider by day and an architect by night. Like, you don't know how to, So the technical assistance that's provided by LISC is really important for these projects being successful, because they work with the providers to make sure they have all the appropriate pre-planning done, that they have everything they need from a zoning perspective, so that these projects they're putting forward are successful.
Ages of the population?
Oh, yes. So within the state, where the need for potential, we call them slots, right? Like where the need is for slots. So for instance, in Eastern Connecticut, we still have a lack of childcare. It's often referred to as a childcare desert. We've made progress there, but there's still a lack of childcare. So they would definitely be looking at places in the state where there has to be an increase in those slots. But for the facility upgrades, that could apply to anywhere in the state based on the application. Perfect. Yeah. That's helpful. Awesome.
I feel like my feedback's a little niche to my own experience.
We'll all learn something.
You were talking about slots, and I'm a researcher at UConn for the Office of Early Childhood, and we often talk about slots versus spaces. And this connects to the portal, or the idea of a portal that comes up in 2 of the bills. And I think that idea would be amazing, and it is very much needed. But you need the information to put in the portal. Yes. And that information is not as readily available as one might think. Say more. So that everyone understands. We have state-funded programs and private programs. There are requirements of state-funded programs, which mostly those state-funded programs adhere to, but often they don't. So that would be reporting attendance information. That would be help us understand the difference between a slot, that are the people who run our government create slots, and spaces, which is actually where kids can go. Because if the slots are filled, then we don't have space for children. But the only way we can know if there's space for children is based on the reporting at the program level. So that's required of state-funded programs with not complete compliance, but it's not required of private programs. So I think that that's important, that if you're going to have a portal, you need the details to fill the portal so that families can use the portal the way they should. And then the flip side of that is there's a registry in Connecticut, which is where all teachers, early childhood educators, put information about their education and their training. That's not required in Connecticut. And so it's a place we often go to learn about the educators in the state, but we can't actually learn about them because it's not complete. In Massachusetts, that's required. So just as a taxpayer, I think maybe we should require the registry here in Connecticut because we have a lot of room to grow from that information. And right now we're sort of dealing with an incomplete deck when we talk about these problems.
That is super helpful, and I want you to add to it, because one of the things, and I will just admit that as someone who has not been immersed as an educator or technically in the early childhood lingo as much as I'd have to be in the last 2 years, I really appreciate your consideration of the data, because I think something that has surprised me along this path of working on this issue significantly in the last 2 years is some of the data issues. Is thinking that, oh, I would assume our state has the data, and then finding out, no, we don't have the data, when it seems such a common sense thing. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah.
So these funds. My assumption, and it could be very wrong,
Yeah.
is that if you are a program, a home care provider, a private, a public school, you are now technically a state-funded seat, which then would require you to engage in the registry, ECE reporter, all of those data collection systems. But I'm also hearing us talk about it very broadly. So I guess my question is,
That is an assumption, because in each of the bills, it works sort of differently right now. So what I would say about the governor's bill is that is assuming that the dollars would be put out to RFP for more providers to apply to be state-funded programs. It's not assuming that every provider in the state would suddenly become state-funded, because for some providers, not only it might not make financial sense to pursue becoming state-funded, but they just might not be interested in going through the work of becoming a state-funded program. So as was shared, what's difficult is that you're only going to potentially get the data from state-funded programs the way that the system is set up now, unless you establish a requirement that every provider has to provide a certain amount of data.
it leads me to the bigger question of, other than maybe the governor's bill, the other two bills, you don't necessarily have to meet any state requirements to receive those funds. It can kind of be anyone who's providing childcare.
For 5003, that applies to everyone. The Senate bill also, I will tell you, only applies to state-funded programs. And they have phases to their approach, but the first phase, which will take up most of the money, would only apply to state-funded programs.
So I guess my feedback.
Yes.
Field over 35 years
Please.
is having the accountability is going to allow for that increase in qualifications and quality.
Yeah.
And that's all I'll say.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. Yeah. You all are getting our steps in just by being in the room.
Yes, we are. Yeah. I have a question. You're talking about these three separate bills.
Currently, yes.
Is the ultimate goal to create one bill that combines,
thank you,
somehow
Marty.
combines
Yes.
all these?
We're making a very big pot of soup right now, and we're hoping that it can be served in a beautiful platter that everyone will support, and that the House and Senate will vote on and the governor will sign, all by the first week of June. No, first week in June. Yeah, first week in June. Yeah.
You to get that done.
You all are doing it right now. Obviously, you know your legislators. So, keeping up with us is important. But I would say, honestly, if you have, friends or family or, folks in other parts of the state and you really care about this, I would encourage them to reach out to their legislators to make sure this gets done and as a priority. But do you want to add to that?
That's all I would say. It's just engaging, sending notes, submitting testimony, just to show support. The more support, the better. And also just this kind of feedback, things that you may really have to offer, because it's important to look at that, like to hear about this registry pieces of things we don't know, but to show support, I think volume is helpful many times.
Oh, I don't.
Okay. Thanks. So I can't believe in what you're trying to do any more than I already do. I mean, I think it's so important, and I say that because I don't want this question to come across wrong. But I read before coming here, I read some of the concerns of OEC about sustainability,
Yes.
about the fact that it appears that the House bill is moving toward faster action. Let's address it now. Let's jump on it. Where maybe there's some feeling that some of the other approaches are potentially more sustainable, less risky in terms of what you're putting out there initially with the House bill. And am I understanding that correctly?
Well, what you're speaking to is the current House bill for comparison. The governor's bill and the Senate bill are very similar, that of those dollars that go into the fund, they only spend up to 10% of the fund, and it's treated more like an endowment. The House bill was meant to provide an alternative at the other end of the spectrum, whereas the money put in the fund with the House bill spends 90%, keeps 10% of the fund in place, and really meant to provide those two different pictures in a way of where we could go. And obviously the House bill is trying to recognize that there's estimated, when the Blue Ribbon panel work was done on childcare, that what's needed to actually achieve all of these things we're talking about is at least $1 billion, in the immediate, right? And so none of these, proposals, especially if you're only spending down 10%, get close to that. And that's why the House bill was trying to push forward with, we should at least expend a little bit more out of this fund from the beginning. Yes.
So
Yes.
so just the piece of me that would like to see us trending, and
Yes.
particularly in a time of what I would call economic uncertainty, maybe unprecedented economic uncertainty, I guess the concern that I would have would be that there be consideration maybe to staging it. Maybe you move toward a percentage that then steps up and then steps up, but that you can adjust course rather than this 90%, which I don't run my household that way. I'm fortunate to not have to run the household that way. But my husband and I don't look at what we have and say, let's burn 90% of it this year and see where it lands us. So just as a thought that it would be more palatable to me. I mean, and I preface this with, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see it last.
And I do agree with you, and I think that's where we will end up in some form in the negotiation. I think more than anything, we want to make sure that there's something meaningful, right, that families and providers, really see even in the first few years of putting this forward, because as you all said, you've been waiting like decades. So I think we want to be mindful of that while maintaining the fund.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. Very good feedback.
I just have a question, actually 2 questions. Those 3 bills or this one main goal, it's going to be 100% state fund, or that's federal fund too, or other funds coming together to be able
Great
to
question.
do this?
These proposals are based on state funds.
Okay.
But our early childhood system certainly relies on federal funding. And what we were saying a little earlier around the fears around the loss of Head Start funding is something we're very concerned about and obviously would need to react to. But each of these items, really would be reliant on state funds only.
Okay, okay. And another thing I want to ask, maybe if I'm not super educated about it, you can let me know. Just thinking about when we talk about, spaces and make sure families have access, thinking about families that I hear from that have a kid with high needs, like profound autism, right?
Yes.
And teachers are paraprofessional, they're doing the best they can do, but not really I'm not saying educate, but like doesn't have a proper training, right? Like is burning the professional, families are doing what they can. Like when we talk about this whole scenario, has a breakdown around, okay, families that doesn't have high needs and family does have high needs. Like I have friends that they never was able to have the kid in a moment for they family have a time. Right? I'm thinking about a specific person, but she's right now have a teenager. And when she shared that with me, I was like, how does this fare with, this family? So when we talk about those bills, how is the breakdown thinking about the specific families that really need people who experience so they can rely on and have a break too?
Thank you for that. What I heard a little bit about was a family who is experiencing caring for a child with autism, right? Very high needs, right? And that's why you brought up earlier the real need to invest in what are birth to 3 and really should be birth to 5 services.
Birth forever.
Yeah,
Yes.
because the earlier, again, that folks' needs can be addressed, we know that will not just help them, but cut our costs as a state long-term around special education, which is another topic that we're debating at the legislature right now. I would say that there is nothing specific in each of these bills right now that addresses families or children with disabilities, but one of the things we've heard time and time again is that there needs to be more funding for the providers, for the educators, for the folks who are providing the care so that they actually are, supported to stay in the field, to get the additional training they might want and need, and to make sure that the kids are being served well in the early childhood programs that are available. So I would say that it's definitely a part of how, we're trying to make sure that the early childhood care and education programs have the resources and the training to serve that need. But we have to make sure that more than anything, the birth to 3 program has the rates that it needs, because those are the services, from my understanding, that parents aren't able to access as much now. And there's waiting lists for some families to get those services for their kids.
My education, when I'm reading a bill and I see birth to 3, that is pretty much where it should be in my mind.
Oh, where you're thinking about it?
Yes, should address that point of high needs.
For disabilities.
For disabilities, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, and I think this is really good that you're raising it because, first of all, the rates of autism just alone we know are increasing. But you're talking about broadly all disabilities, and we also know that early care and intervention is critical. Yeah. And this isn't really speaking to that specifically. We're looking at the birth to 3, but it is a bit of a whole. I think if we're going to accurately assess this, that would need to be something that we continue to look at and to address. It's really important. I mean, I think if we look at just we know this, and this is a part of the work we've done in West Hartford Public Schools, is what I know as a parent, is what I know as an educator, and so much of what I hear in this space. And so I do think it is something that as we continue to fine tune this bill, this legislation, this work, that needs to be a part that we look at very critically. And so it's so noted.
Yeah.
Really good point.
And can I just add, it's just as a feedback, I think also we need to call, right? Like we need to be transparent with the people who pay the tax. Like that should have a line to address those families. Like you are addressing as a community as a whole, but they are part of the community and in not being seen in this bill. And I appreciate your work, but I think we should take in consideration, have something for that.
Absolutely. And I do think it's seen through birth to 3, but I think we need to look very closely. Does this cover as much as we need it to cover? Yes. And if not, let's figure that out. Let's be I believe in being very open and transparent and really looking at our needs. And so I think that's a really good point.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
and correct me if I'm wrong, what I feel like I hear you saying is you have a friend who had a child with profound autism and could not access early child care.
It's multiple friends.
Right.
I'm thinking about one specific. but
In the
this
birth to
is-
three, so there's the age group of birth to three, then there's the agencies of birth to three, and the agencies of birth to three that serve young children with significant needs, it is not, they are visiting once a week maybe to go provide 30 to 45 minutes of support. That is not supporting a childcare provider in a meaningful way to sustain having a child with extreme behaviors or whatever, however that child presents. And I will also say and I only know the governor's bill because I spend a lot of time with OEC people, is that I know that the governor did meet with superintendents multiple times around increasing. Many districts have a half day, 2.5 hours, 4 days a week. That's what West Hartford has for students with IEPs, for preschoolers. What do you need, superintendents, to make that a regular school day, school year program? And as someone who runs the school day, school year kind of general ed, with still a 27% of my students have IEPs, families are desperate even just for school day, school year versus the 2.5 hours. So there is a component in the governor's bill there, or at least in the OEC plan, to try and increase that. But I think the bigger question is private programs. Home care providers like, I can't do this, we can't do this, we don't have the staff to do this.
Correct.
So
I
how
think
are we
that's-
supporting them?
Yeah, and I think that's what I've heard.
Right.
It's hard to ask providers, again, in this, like, for them to possibly do more, right, when they're so underpaid and under-resourced. And so that's why I think part of the goal of, how do we support them, to get more of the pay and benefits that they deserve. But a piece of that is also that there could be more opportunity out of that to really engage the educators more in some of this, additional support or training beyond what they might feel like they're capable of right now.
Yeah, even like I have a 2-year-old who was diagnosed with profound autism. They really need one-on-one adult support in the home, outside the home. Is there a special fund that would support families that they can contract and that person goes with their child to childcare or provides it in the home or
We have to keep coming up with those ideas because I think we're debating right now in the legislature special education, but that's K to 12. Again, it's not a mind to this entire continuum. And therefore, as more of this funding takes hold, I think the Blue Ribbon panel work that was done on childcare really named children with disabilities, and also a lot of refugee and immigrant children in our communities that were often most underserved by a lot of our providers. And both of them, we need to pay close attention to your point of, is this even working for them and their families? Because we can't assume that it is. We have to make sure that there's really a dialogue happening about what actually would ensure that people are getting the care that they need for their kids. Yeah. I want to be mindful of our time, so we'll do one more and
Just
we'll
ask you
wrap
to
up.
repeat a quick question you had said a few minutes ago about what were the names of those states where the billionaires had to pay more tax for funding?
That's why I said it.
Massachusetts and what else? Is that it?
Massachusetts was they passed a referendum. Our state does not have the referendum process. So in Massachusetts, there was a referendum that all of the residents of Massachusetts could vote on, and they voted in the majority to pass this new tax on millionaires and billionaires.
And we
that
don't have
was-
an equivalent process?
We do not have an equivalent process in Connecticut. We do
But
not
you're going to
have the
start one?
referendum. So you have to rely on us. You got to rely on us to do that. Yeah, but that
We're
would
willing to
pay
help
for
you.
a lot of this,
Well, I
right?
thought that was a nice thing to mention. Thank
It
you. I
is,
just didn't
yeah,
get the state.
yeah.
Okay.
So I
Anyone
just
else
wanna
want to support
offer
billionaires
my
paying?
my colleagues a chance to say a final few words as we head out. So, Bobby?
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Tammy. It was good being here and actually listening to the conversation and dialogue. It was very refreshing and actually kind of kind of frustrating as well at the same time. You know, all my life I've been a middle school educator, and this is a step I really haven't dipped into. But you know, what I'm hearing tonight is like, you know, we're here talking tonight on our level. There's a caucus that we're a part of. We met with the governor about 3 weeks ago, and a lot of what we're talking about right now is some of the frustrations that in that caucus and a lot of people are feeling. It's like equity and access to early child care, just in general. Like everyone doesn't have the equity and access to early childhood education. Equity and knowledge of how to obtain early childhood education, how to find a provider for your child. Equity in pay, as far as the teachers are concerned. I mean, again, I need to learn more myself, but you know, in standard public schools, you know, you have sort of equity. You have steps. You know, you have districts who have contracts. Is that such thing in early childhood education? Even in teacher evaluation, the quality of teachers that we have in early childhood education. And then the thing about the slots versus the seats and registering, I'm sure that's a very complicated for a lot of parents. Actually, and again, it's about access. And I will throw this question out there again. You know, I'm learning and being up here talking in this conversation. You know, we have the Office of Early Childhood Education and the State Department of Education. Should there be some blending there? Do we need to have two agencies? I'm just throwing it out there. So this is a good conversation, and thank you guys for coming out tonight, and thank you, Kate.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you, Bobby. Do you want to say something? That, my battery's almost dead. Oh, okay.
It's still good.
Right, it died.
I just want to thank you all. Oh. Oh my gosh.
We got you.
Cut that out, Mary Beth. I just want to thank you all for coming out this evening. I think this is when we get our best ideas, because for me, I'm just sitting here thinking, you've really identified a whole, right? When I think about, I mean, many things. The registry is something that I think it seems that it would be the most fundamental thing to have, to know the backgrounds of credentials. I'd love to think it's somewhere in someone's file cabinet that we aren't accessing, but it very well is something that we should look at. And this, and just this special needs, disabilities piece is huge, because Birth to 3 is a push-in, right? It's not a program. And I love what we have in West Hartford. I think it's incredible. You can see it. I have seen children. I saw one yesterday, this young man who was at Whiting Lane. He's a young man now. And I remember he has profound autism. To see where he has come. And he was in that really early program that he could come in several days a week and push in and stay in. But to have that, looking at that kind of model and how it connects as children do enter to the public school system. But to be the parent of a child that you cannot have childcare for is a tremendous loss for the child, for their growth. It's difficult for the family and the parents. And so what I would really like to come away with is this is such valuable time because of the ideas and the thoughts that you've brought our way, so that this is a first step. We can always be iterative in our work. But thank you for the time and your ideas, because it really is going to help us make, I hope, really robust legislation over time. And hopefully we'll have the funding to keep this moving forward. But it won't be for a lack of desire to do so. So thank you. Thank you for this.
I will just reiterate a big thanks. I have to say, as legislators, what?
And I have to thank Kate. Let me just Kate has worked so hard. She has been, this is her thing. And so we have to give her a round of applause. She's really been dedicated to this, putting in so much time and effort. You can hear it, you can see it. She's really put this in. And once in a while, we have these very special opportunities to lead legislation that can really make a difference for all of our children and our communities. And I know a little bit about it, but I'm so grateful that you're doing this for the behavioral health piece. But good work.
Thank you, Tammy. Yes. That means a lot. I will just reiterate the thank yous, because as legislators, we plan these events, and again, thanks to Michaela for your help. But just like any party you host, you know, you think no one's going to show up. So I'm always thrilled, you know, when folks want to show up and actually not just show up, but again, participate in community on an issue that matters to all of us. And as I shared, this legislation is being negotiated right now, and all of your input was incredibly valuable and is really going to help us. And I I would say don't be a stranger because, again, we have a lot to do between now and the first week of June. But as Representative Exum shared, this is serious, hard work. You all are in it every day, and you care about so many kids and grandkids that need this care every day. So it won't stop at the first week of June, and we just encourage you to keep coming to us with your questions and ideas. So thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you.
We put out our little QR code for our LGP. Can we hand that up? Is that okay?
Of course.
Because we have to apply for our
Yes,
fee.
I know.
So
I talked to them about I would love to come.
So yes.